Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm here with Phebe Bell, the Director of Behavioral Health at Nevada County. Um, we just thought we would get with you guys and talk about some of the feelings that maybe some of us are experiencing right now from a mental health aspect. I know for me personally, last week, it was Thursday when we usually put both the Sierra Sun and the Union to bed. And usually that's a sense of relief after we get both of those knocked out because it's a long day. But for me, it was a little bit of a heavy feeling. And I'm just wondering, is that normal for folks to be feeling right now?
Absolutely. Pretty much everyone is feeling a pretty high degree of sort of existential dread and deep sadness, as well as a high level of anxiety. There's so much that has changed in our lives in such a short period of time. And probably one of the hardest parts is there's so much unknown still all around us. And for people with any amount of anxiety in their system to start with, and many people run with some amount of anxiety on a good day, uh, the unknown is one of the hardest things. And right now, we don't know so many things. We don't know if we're going to stay healthy. We don't know if our loved ones are going to stay healthy. We don't know how long we're going to stay in this isolated state. We don't know what our economy is going to do. All these big questions that are scary, and out of our control. And I think that's really contributing to our overall mental health, our sense of well-being that we all are struggling with right now.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, in everyday life, when we deal with the ups and downs of life, there's diversions we can turn to. There are things that we all have our own
Yeah.
enjoyment with, but pretty limited right now. So, what are some of the things that you think that people should be thinking about doing if they're kind of feeling a little bit down and they want to lighten the load, so to speak, this heavy feeling that they're having?
In addition to sort of all this background stuff that's happening, the reality is we're in this state of isolation or distancing right now. And, the original term that was being used was social distancing. And in the behavioral health field, we've been trying to change that language to physical distancing, because really right now we need to be social connecting as much as we possibly can. Because for most of us, connecting with others is a big source of our well-being. It's where we get our, happiness and sense of safety and connection. And so how do we increase connectivity while we're physically staying safe from each other? So your question about what can we do to take care of ourselves right now, I think something that first comes to mind is the basics. And it's kind of like the basics of staying safe right now or washing your hands. Equally much, the basics of staying well right now is doing the good things for your physical body and emotional well-being. So it's eating healthy meals. It's not overdoing it on sugar, drugs, or alcohol. It's exercising when you can. And that's where we're pretty lucky in Nevada County and the Tahoe Truckee areas. We have a lot of access to outdoors where we can stay distanced physically from people, but get out. It's sleeping. Like doing those things to keep your resilience up is really, really extra important right now. And then I would say, back to that connecting piece, that it's a really good time to get creative around how you connect to others. And I think I've certainly seen it in my life, and I'm sure many of us have seen this as well. We can all rag on technology and we're all glued to our phones and all those things, but suddenly there are lifelines to connecting with our family who may be far away, people we're worried about, our friends. And that's been a really beautiful thing to, me and my brother and sister all live in different places, and we, get our families together on Zoom on Sunday evenings. And that's been so nice to have that kind of time together, for example. I think the other thing to think about is people who don't have access to that technology and how can we help support them. And the neighborhood I live in, we have a number of older residents on our street. And so just been trying to, if I see them out front shoveling or whatever, come outside as well and just chat with them and see how they're doing, see if they have any needs, and just sort of that kind of connecting and reaching out to people in the ways that are safe to do so, but using those social connections.
And for the folks you mentioned, those that don't have the technology maybe to connect that way, but also people who are maybe feeling really overwhelmed right now, and not sure, maybe they don't feel safe to talk to somebody about it, or just at least somebody they know. I know that you guys have all kinds of resources out there to help people all the time, and certainly it seems to me that those would be really highly valued right now for those people who do need someone to talk to. Can you share some how or the ways that they can go about connecting with those folks?
I was just earlier talking to somebody who was worried about a coworker. She felt really isolated because she's really nervous and anxious, and her husband isn't, and is frustrated with her anxiety, and it's raising the tensions between them. One resource that was new to me when this incident kind of came online that I think is a really useful one. The federal government, it's called SAMHSA, it's one of the federal departments, runs a disaster distress line. And it's really for people who are having a hard time coping emotionally with a disaster. And infectious diseases are a disaster. And so their staff is really specifically trained to help people who are really struggling during this time. So that's one option. That number is 1-800-985-5990. So that's one thing to know about. And then locally, we have a mental health crisis line, and I really encourage people to reach out. Sometimes when we get to a really dark place where the fear, the anxiety, the isolation, the aloneness becomes overwhelming, it's hard to talk to the people you know. It's too overwhelming. You don't want to burden them. You don't want to scare them. Sometimes being more anonymous and being able to call a crisis line is the best way to go for that person. Please reach out. Call 265-5811, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Somebody will be there to talk to you and help figure out what resources can help you get through that moment. We all have to recognize that it is a hard time. It's okay to feel scared and overwhelmed and sad. And it's even more important to say so to somebody, to anybody, whoever is the right person for you, friend or family or crisis line volunteer or staff person.
You alluded this earlier, but it just got me thinking when you said that, you're talking to people who you love and know, and maybe not feel you don't want to burden them. I'm just wondering, the longer this goes on, it seems this would wear on people as we go. Particularly with those they love the most, that maybe, for example, my wife not being used to me working next to her all day long.
Yeah.
But also keeping in mind those things like, people are different. And for me personally, I'm certainly very much a rule follower. So as I got the guidelines, and so that means to me, when one from my family walks out that front door, my question is, where are you going? Are you going to stay 6 feet apart, and all that? And I'm just wondering, from their perspective, not as much as mine, what should I do to kind of keep that in check and not maybe raise their level of anxiety or frustration with me? Because I can imagine that could be kind of a tough thing to work through.
You obviously have self-awareness to recognize that you're taking your anxiety sometimes and externalizing it onto the people you live with. And I think parents in particular are really struggling with this, of how to make decisions for their family, for their children, for their older children. Like in my case, I have a child who just came home. How do you set rules and expectations for your household that everybody can live with and agree with, and yet not kind of create a higher level of anxiety for the people around you than they're naturally feeling or needing to feel? It's, I think, a lot about self-awareness, about back to that self-care thing, taking the time for yourself to, when you're having that anxious thought, like, oh my God, you're going somewhere, what are you doing? Okay, how can I breathe through this? What's the reasonable, rational approach here versus the emotional response to this situation? Taking the time to step back, take a few deep breaths, maybe even when you're not in that agitated state, thinking through ahead of time, and having, I would suggest, like a family meeting to say, all right, let's all agree on parameters that we think are fair and are going to keep us all safe. And then it's my job not to hound you on those, and it's your job to stick with them and live with them without pushing the boundaries of them. If your kids are on the younger side, or there's no kids in the house, it's just you and roommates or partners, still important to come to those agreements because you're sharing space together. And so you have to have some common rules around, when you're out in the public sphere, what's going to be reasonable for you all to agree to live with in terms of risk. And I think also, I'm hearing it a lot when there's one person in a household with health needs of some kind, whether that's a roommate with a pre-existing condition or a parent who lives in the house. And so everybody needing to kind of rise their level of awareness to that person's level of need, and how to negotiate that can be challenging. I think communication is so critical. Again, preferably communication prior to the moment where somebody's wanting to charge out the door to the really fun thing they want to go do, setting those expectations ahead of time and agreeing to them.
We know this is a difficult time for our seniors and elders, particularly at care centers, where they're being isolated more than usual. I'm just wondering, what can we do for them? How can we help them through this time?
I think we all know particularly frightening for seniors who are at higher risk, and their need to isolate is even stronger and more critical. And yet loneliness is a really real concern for people who are seniors, as is depression, and wanting to do all we can to make sure people still know they're loved and cared for, and that there's people around them who are wondering how they're doing, and caring about them. I've heard a couple of really great ideas happening out there. I think the Truckee Tahoe Community Foundation is organizing a letter writing campaign, so that when meals are delivered to homebound seniors, that handwritten letters are accompanying them. That's pretty neat.
Mhm.
In Western Nevada County, there's a phone outreach tree that's trying to get into place, where phone calls can happen to homebound seniors. And I think throughout the country, we probably all heard some of the really great coverage of just beautiful things neighbors are doing for each other right now. And I've been really trying to focus a lot on sort of the silver linings of this time. And I think that's certainly one of them, is we're remembering that we actually do all care about each other. And in the last years of divisiveness and whatnot, it's sometimes easy to forget that, and to see the human spirit kind of flourish again in that way of love and caring for one another as fellow human beings through those kind of outreach efforts is pretty neat to see.
Yeah, I feel pretty blessed to be working in at both ends of the county, between the Sierra Sun and the Union, in communities that really have always exemplified that, at least to my understanding, and to see that come forward
Yeah.
at this time, it's pretty cool. So those stories, those heartwarming stories of people helping, we want to hear about those too. We want to share those with the community. So I encourage anyone who's watching this and knows of those stories to contact us at news@theunion.com or news@sierrasun.com. We'll be glad to share those stories. They're important, certainly right now.
I agree. They give us hope, and they inspire us too, like, oh, somebody did that. That's pretty neat. I think I could do something kind and thoughtful too. And it just grows. It's a contagious energy, which is really lovely.
Hey, just to go back a little bit on, we were talking about having younger people in the house. I have a teenage daughter. I know most of those, being digital natives, they're very used to doing a lot of their socializing digitally on their social media platforms and that sort of thing. But the other thing about it is when they're together, that connectivity, that just being with their friends physically, that's a big important part of their life right now. And I'm just wondering, what you suggest, or what you see that maybe could help them at this time.
I have a college age and just out of college age, two daughters, and I totally relate. It is so hard for them. Friends are everything, and that feeling connected and feeling in the midst of the group is so important at that age. Um, like you said, they have a lot of strategies that the rest of us are just learning. My daughter laughs as I'm trying to get on my next Zoom thing and whatever. So they're super good at that. And I've, one of my daughters started doing Netflix watching parties with friends, where you can all log on together to the same movie and chat on the side and this and that. There's lots of online creative strategies. But I think it's incredibly important to remember that this is really hard for that age group. And so for the teenage group, I think it's really trying to head on address that with them, open the doors of communication so that they feel safe bringing up when they're struggling, when they're having a hard time, really trying to start those conversations, letting them know that how they're feeling is normal, that you're here to support them, that things will get back to how they used to be at some point in time, their friends still care about them, all those kinds of pieces, but really opening the dialogue, because that's when it can get hard for teens, and making sure they know the resources that are out there, both in terms of family members that care, but also hotlines and text chat lines that they can reach out to as well. That's all super important. I think for younger kids, as adults, we really need to monitor what we're exposing them to in terms of news coverage, and also modeling for them, even if we're not feeling calm inside ourselves, the more we can model calmness and confidence in managing this chapter, the less they need to worry for us. And that's really important with those younger kids. I've been hearing from some parents who are seeing, real behavior changes in their younger children, regressing to bedwetting or temper tantrums or things they hadn't seen in a year or two out of the child. And those are just real signs of a child who's under stress and just absorbing that adult world stress and not being able to articulate it or how to handle it. And so it comes out in behavior with children often. And that can add to your stress as a parent because, that's hard behavior to manage. But at least if you can see that that's what the behavior is coming from, then you can start to think about, okay, we need to not have the news on when my 6-year-old's in the room. I need to, if I'm having a moment of feeling overwhelmed by this, it's my moment to go for a walk around the block and come back in a calmer state so I can really be present as a parent for my child right now, and kind of using some of those types of strategies to minimize their sort of stress environment that they're otherwise going to be absorbing.
Definitely a balancing act from a parent's perspective, I think. And
yeah,
I appreciate that insight. Is there anything else that you want to be sure to share with people right now as closing thoughts as we wrap up, just in general about taking care of yourself and each other?
For anybody out there that prior to this crisis had challenges with their mental health, which most of us do, to be honest, and you had some kind of supports you were getting, whether that's a therapist you saw or medications you were taking, I strongly encourage you to keep those supports in place right now. This is not the time to experiment with reducing your medications or skipping your therapy appointments. For those of you that didn't have those kinds of supports in place, this might be the time to reach out and access them. Nearly every insurance plan is trying to offer a lot more over the phone and video mental health services right now, including the county, but even private insurance and whatnot. And that can be a pretty easy support to access. So it's worth looking into what your insurance has to offer. And if you can, go into your bedroom and have a video chat with a therapist, that might be a great way to get some support if you're hitting a real rough patch. And again, I think just wanting to stress to people, don't be hard on yourself. It's normal to have this feel like a rough patch because it is a rough patch. And of course you feel sad and stressed and worried and all those things. That's incredibly normal. And just cope with it in a healthy way. Take care of your body, take care of your mental health, reach out for help. I can't say that enough. And I think I'll just end one more time with saying our crisis line number, just because I want to make sure people really have that in their minds. 265-5811, 530-265-5811. If you're in any kind of crisis or really distressed, please reach out.
We're definitely going to get through this together. It's going to take us all to certainly keep bending that curve, so to speak, and to support each other. So thank you and folks like you that are helping us all through this. I really appreciate you making the time because I do think it's an important thing to share, and hopefully some folks out there will gain from this and maybe get a smile back on their faces. Like you were saying, it's a community of people who really care, and there's somebody out there that's ready to support you in any needs you have. So reach out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.